And Bill Clinton, I don't think he was the first choice. Um, I think that the establishment, the globalists, would have much rather have a second George George Bush Senior administration, Herbert Walker administration, than a Clinton administration. That's what I think. Um, and if you think about it, if I'm not mistaken, Clinton was not a part of the elite class. He might have been in the grooming. He was the governor of Arkansas. I think that there was a lot of compromising things that went on in Arkansas while he was the governor. I think that's when the compromising started because maybe they could see that he had charisma and was influential and they wanted to try to own and control him. Um, but unfortunately, this is my guess philosophically, was that they couldn't pin the stuff that was going on in Arkansas directly to Clinton without exposing other people or other things that were needing to be protected. I think the Ross Perot factor played a big role in the election for Clinton against Bush. And look, I at the time that Ross Perot dropped out of the race and then came back in, I actually later heard his story about why he did that, and I believe it. I believe that's exactly what happened because knowing what I know now, it makes perfect sense. He might possibly would have won had he not dropped out of the race and then came back in. It made him seem unreliable in certain ways and maybe even a little bit crazy because I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, he actually revealed the threats against his family at the time that he dropped out. And then he went into further details later on. And having been through some changes of my own, I very, very much understand that fear. What's kind of crazy is that I was not a high profile person. My conflicts with government were very localized. And to be honest, I'm it's some of the times the people that you're worried about in these sort of shadowy places, they don't care about the normal things that people care about. So therefore, they're not really well versed at making the kind of threats of things that they can actually get away with that would cause long-term harm. I'm not going to go into what they are, but I'm going to just say I actually think that's the fact because sometimes when you're an ordinary person, little things mean a lot. And if you're an ordinary person, even if you've attained high status, those little things still mean a lot. I think in this case, he had a daughter that was about to get married. You can't undo ruining a wedding. Everybody knows that. So I can, and for his daughter who wasn't a part of this, who was just happening to be his daughter. What a dilemma. I look at what the Trump family has been through. What a dilemma for someone to have to decide whether their family should be protected when they have this bigger overriding issue of our country is in trouble. So I don't minimize that dilemma at all. And looking back on it, I think that he maybe did the best that he could, and it was probably better than the alternative because I do believe that Bill Clinton had some independence during his presidency, which was why he was constantly under attack. Neither Obama nor George W. Bush had anything like the amount of attacks that Clinton had. So coming from either side, and the things that were happening, particularly under George W. Bush, but I feel like also under Obama, were much more serious than anything that Clinton did. So, anything that he did that he was being attacked for. There were certainly some things he could have been attacked for that were much more related to problems, like some of the things that happened with his. I mean, he seemed very hesitant to go into war. I remember him dropping some bombs somewhere during during the time that he was about to be impeached, that when there was about to be a vote. And I remember he had something to do with, I think, the Yugoslavia thing. I'm not exactly certain of those. But, it's very, very hard to for them to sell a war against white or Anglo people in the U.S. And so there was compared to the Middle Eastern wars, I feel like there was much less coverage. I could be wrong about that. I could be wrong about it. But either way, I think it's all the same. I don't think that any of them care about any of this stuff. They just want to break the world up into pieces that they can manage, and that's it. So we have Clinton come along, and he was savvy enough that he was able to stick. And I think they felt like he's doing enough. So they just started reworking their strategy, because I think it was during the George W. Bush years. Again, I think that that was when they had to get rid of Herman Cain. And he was anointed, just like they do. They were more discreet about it in the Republican Party. And I think at that time, the Republican voters were a little bit more obedient. That George W. Bush was kind of anointed to go into that position. And I actually started to have problems then, because I said, if they did this in another country, if a father was president and then a few years later his son was president, we'd be calling that a dictatorial regime, And so right after, I think it was during the Bush years, I think that they went from trying to compromise and control people after they got into their positions of influence and authority, and they started trying to influence and compromise them way younger, and then promote them and elevate them, in many cases artificially. And it's not always that difficult to identify people who have charisma at a young age, and so if you can do that and then you just steer them in the wrong direction and co-opt them, it's very much like what they do in the entertainment business. I think that we switched, and I think that that's probably, while the Epstein saga was born long before that, long before the maybe not that long before, but I believe that, I can't remember, he bought his island somewhere around maybe like the late 90s. I'm not 100% certain of that. You guys can correct me in the comments. That's about how long it took for them to start getting their crop of people. And this is only one part of the operation, so that by the time you got your power because you were compromised, they didn't have to compromise you or try to invent some kind of compromising scenario after the fact. No, now they're proactive. You can't even get there unless we already control you.